I want to say good evening to everybody. Thank you so much for coming along tonight. Really good to see some familiar faces out there as well. So welcome. Just going to make sure that everything is okay and that our recording is starting. Bear with me for just a moment. Okay, terrific. Just one moment. We'll get this all set up. There we go. We're underway. Fantastic. Um, I'm going to say thank you for coming here tonight. Um, Before we start, last time I forgot to mention this. If you want to ask questions at the end of the session, this will go for about 45 minutes. And at the end of the session, please, in fact, prior to the end of the session, just pop something down into the chat. And that's going to pop up for me. And I'll just work my way through that list at the end. So if you've got any comments on the presentation, if you've got any questions, really happy to answer those. By the way, if you've got something a little bit more personal, if your question is sort of digging a little bit deeper and you don't want to share that in this group environment, just send me a message and we'll organise just a catch up on Zoom for 15 minutes and I can answer that there. So I'm going to say thank you very much for that. Okay, let's get going. The session tonight is really a session about adults with ARFID. Now, adults with ARFID can tend to be a little bit lost over time. So what I want to do tonight is give the adults, particularly in the group, and thank you for all the new adults in the group and the ones that have been there for some time. I want to really go behind the scenes and talk to you guys. And when I mean adults, I mean, I'm not trying to put a line on it, but really we're talking about 19 plus. If we talk about teens in secondary school, we're talking about that 13 to 18-year-old age group. Now we're talking about 19 plus. And in reality, we're probably talking about 20s plus. People have been doing it all their life. They've had a gut full of it. They don't believe they can change. They've tried everything. This is the presentation that's sort of aimed at you guys. So I'm going to give you a general look at ARFID, and then we're going to really dive into something a little bit more specific on the adult side. I really like this picture that you're seeing on screen. It really speaks to me. If we imagine that cylinder on the screen, imagine that cylinder is the true ARFID. So when we shine a light of therapy or investigation onto that cylinder, we end up seeing different things. All of a sudden on the wall, we might see a square that's got something orange around it, or a blue light might show just a circle with some light around it. What I want to do tonight is I want to shine the light on the cylinder behind the images on the screen to give you a really good look at what the true ARFID is. Okay, so let's get going. General intro, we've already spoken about that. Want to give you some insights into ARFID behaviours and causes. Also want to give you a different perspective. There's a wonderful saying, if we change the way that we look at things, the things that we look at change. Now, a lot of people think that ARFID is a physical thing, and yes, there can be sensory, there can be neurodiverse components and interoceptive things, no problem with all of that. But there's a real heavy layer on top of everything, which is really that internal anxiety that the mind has built up towards food. It can be a fear, it can be disinterest, a lot of different things. So I want to give you a different perspective on why you just might be feeling the way you're feeling around ARFID. Also, I want to share with you some really cool stuff. Seen so many clients over the years, particularly a lot of ARFID clients who are adults, and they've given me feedback on the useful things that have helped them that they've taken away from the therapy. So I've got all those in this presentation tonight. Okay, let's keep moving. A little bit about me first. I really specialize in ARFID. I've been doing clinical hypnotherapy for quite some years. And last count, I've seen well over 2,500 ARFID clients. Got an admin group, and that's the reason that you found me here tonight. The ARFID group, of which I'm the administrator, nearly about 6,500 members. And what a great group. We have very little trouble on the group. When the things boil up, we deal with it pretty quickly. But I've got to say, 99% of the time, it's super supportive. And I just love the way that people interact in that group. So thank you. There's an animated YouTube video that some of you may have seen. I'll give you links to that at the end of the session. There's a dedicated ARFID website, arfidtherapy.com, where you can get lots of different information about ARFID. And I just recently put out a book. This is not a plug for the book, but I will say that the book has got a lot of detail about helping you think differently about ARFID. It's a simple read. I've written it as if you're in front of me, having your own personal session. So a lot of people, a lot of the feedback I'm getting from the book is I read it to my 8 or 9 year old, my teenage son has read it, and all of a sudden he's started to feel a little differently. It's music to my ears. It's a very simple read. It's a quick read, but it's going to give you a look behind the scenes. If you haven't seen the cover, then all of a sudden there's the cover. Someone just popped up about an audio version being worked on as we speak. So when that audio version comes out, I've got fingers crossed that it's weeks away. I'll give an update and let everybody know. Okay. So what is ARFID? These are the topics that we're going to be covering tonight. What is ARFID? Going to give you a behind the scenes look on that. Going to understand why some people develop ARFID and some people don't. If you've got a room of 100 people and you expose them all to the same sort of trauma or food or put them in the same environment, then 4 of them are going to walk out with an ARFID feeling and 96 of them are not going to have that. How is that possible that only certain people get ARFID? We'll dive into that as well. I want to let you know where ARFID lives in the mind. This is really critical. A lot of people haven't thought about this, and when they understand this one thing, change really happens quickly. Going to touch base very briefly on neurodiverse things, autism, ADHD, and also anxiety in the mix there as well. Want to challenge some adult thoughts. Here's the adult thought. We've got unrealistic expectations. When we go and try something new, we think that we're going to master that thing new really quickly, and we get disappointed when we don't get the result that we want. Mind you, the expectation, the result that we want, is sometimes set really high. I want to talk about that. Talk about things like doubt and fear of failure. And so many of my mature and adult ARFID clients come in and they just have really low self-esteem. They don't feel good enough. It's as if this thing with food has beaten them down over the years. I want to really touch base on that as well. We've already talked about perception. That's key. I'll guide you through that. Disassociation. What an interesting term. With ARFID, a lot of ARFID clients feel that they are the ARFID. The ARFID is so close to them and is such a part of who they are that there's no distance between the person, the personality, and this thing we call ARFID. So when we disassociate, when we can learn how to put that ARFID at a distance, all of a sudden we've got some space. We can see that there's nothing wrong with us. It's just this thing that's been in our mind for so many years. Start to work on it and let it go. I want to show you how to do that as well. Here's a big one. What does the ARFID recovery path look for adults? So I'll take you through that step by step. Really set up some goalposts, set up some things that you can aim for as far as ARFID recovery goes. And also we'll have a look at some general assistance for everybody with ARFID as well. Okay. 6 myths. Not going to spend time on them. You've heard it all before. I know. These are the myths of ARFID. Don't worry. It's just fussy or picky eating. It'll pass in time. No, it doesn't. Not with ARFID anyway. A lot of people, you hear them say it's just attention seeking, that people's doing it deliberately. What could be further from the truth? I don't know how many times you've heard somebody say, look, if someone's hungry, they'll eventually eat something new. That's fine. Or you've got a well-meaning auntie or uncle who, when you were younger, might have said to your parents, just give me your child for the weekend. I'll get them eating by the end of the weekend. Doesn't work. In fact, it just adds up more trauma. We don't grow out of it. ARFID's something that we organically grow out of, very rarely. It's something that needs to be shifted, a way of thought, a different way of thinking about it. In the past, you might have heard, or your parents might have heard, that it's their fault. They haven't been strong enough. They've been too accommodating. Come on, you've got to be... Pressure is nobody's friend, particularly with ARFID. And so many children I work with can operate on 1, 2, or 3 foods. And someone looking at the outside can say, it's not possible for someone to live off that food. Now, long term, it's not. But the human body is really resilient and it will survive on the bare minimum. But that's not what we're after. We want to increase that. Okay, so let's keep going. Here it is. Here is that picture again. If we're shining a light on ARFID, that cylinder, all of a sudden we're going to see that square, orange square. Is it food aversion? Is it sensory issues? Is someone refusing? They're telling me they can't do it. We're hearing all of that. And if another light is shined on ARFID, all of a sudden we see someone disinterested. They're just dropping foods. Maybe they look stubborn or they're a picky eater. So that's what we see. That's what ARFID presents itself in the person to the world. But behind the scene, the real cause of ARFID, the main cause of ARFID, which is the overlaying thing on top of all these things called anxiety, neurodiverse, and sensory issues, interoceptive, the blanket that covers that all is really an outdated and disproportionate fear in the subconscious mind. And there we go. That's the first time we've mentioned it. I'm going to take you on a journey into your subconscious mind because you're not doing this deliberately. This is not something you're setting out to do. And the adults that are listening to me, successful at many things that you've done in your life, and you often think, how can I do all of these things and yet I can't overcome the obstacle of this thought around food? It's because with a lot of things in your life, using your conscious mind, logical, rational, reasoning mind, it's not where ARFID lives. ARFID lives in a very different part of the mind. I'm going to introduce you to that in just a moment. What is ARFID? Quite simply, it's a condition that causes a person to limit not only the amount, but also the type of food they eat. And it's not really about deliberately weight loss. It's not about dieting or there's no negative body image issues. Really, it's just an inability to increase the amount and type of food that a person eats. And sometimes, not all times, but sometimes the person actually wants to try it. I mean, that disappears as the person get older because they just haven't been able to do it for so long. So they want to, but can't. And you know what? The diet does vary with people with ARFID, but if we take a sort of an overall view, it sort of looks a little bit like a toddler diet. They're very similar foods, and foods that are the same are safe. If food comes out of a packet, it looks the same, it crunches the same, so that's safe. Vegetables, they can have blemishes on them, they can be sour, they can be sweet, they can be in season, out of season, a lot more challenges with those sort of foods. So typically the toddler diet consists of food that are really regular, look and taste and experience the same. And there's normally that rigid list of preferred foods as well. There are many pathways that might contribute to a person sort of getting ARFID or developing ARFID. And quite just briefly, I want to go through them. So it's not a one size fits all. It's really easy to go along and say, okay, somebody's not eating. Here's my assessment of the situation and put them into a cookie cutter approach to try and get them eating again. People come to ARFID in lots of different pathways. Maybe they've had a food trauma when they were younger. Maybe something happened, there was a choking incident or gastro or colic or reflux or a reaction to a vaccination or an allergic response, and it created a mini trauma in that young mind all those years ago. Maybe there was emotional trauma. Maybe all of a sudden they moved house, moved country. Maybe mum and dad split up, or there was some emotional trauma that triggered a change in the person. Sensory processing is really common with ARFID. So maybe when we're younger, people are called super tasters because our taste buds are really strong. And as we get older, they do diminish in that capacity. So sometimes the sensory processing challenges around food put us on high alert. Isn't it interesting that anxiety is really prevalent in ARFID? I think at last count, there was in excess of 70%, close to 75% of people presenting with ARFID have a generalized anxiety that's been with them most of their life. Hypermobility and tongue tie, that really comes into some sort of physical trauma that all of a sudden with a tongue tie, young baby can't suckle properly. If it goes on long enough, it creates a trauma response. Now, this sounds crazy as an adult, but we've got to look at it through the glasses, through the view of the young child, not with all the knowledge you've got today. Autism and neurodiverse, just a different way of looking at the world, but it can incorporate a little bit more rigid thinking and the desire for a strong comfort zone. And when that's overlaid with a nervousness around food, it makes it difficult to push out of that comfort zone. Many of my ADHD clients will say to me, Glenn, I can go all day without eating or drinking. I don't even think about it. I'm too busy doing other stuff, easily distracted. That can also lead to some challenges around food. There's a heightened awareness now in this concept called interoceptive awareness. Of course, it's been with us all of our lives. It's just the signals in the body. Does the body get signals of thirst and hunger? Does it get the signals of being full and not being full, of being replete and not? So it also extends to heat and cold and lots of other things. Sometimes those signals are diffused or they're not as clear as they need to be, and that can create issues as well. And if we overlay something like PDA or oppositional defiance disorder, it just starts to get a little bit more difficult. So lots of different pathways that can lead somebody to ARFID. And by the way, they're not individual. They can be layered on top of each other. We can have one, two, or three, or four of those happening at the same time. I like to share what I call the ARFID equation. I think this is really cool. Yes, it's simple, and I know there's other layers on top of it. No problem. We'll come to those later. But I reckon this is the nuts and bolts of what I've seen in so many of my clients who come and see me. There's got to be something at the start that starts that potential ARFID. Remember what I said before? We've got 100 people in the room, but only 4 of them are developing ARFID. Okay, what's going on? In the younger years, predominantly, there's some sort of trauma event, emotional or physical trauma, or there's a personality trait that lends itself to potential ARFID behavior, talking about high anxiety, neurodiverse, those sorts of things. So when we've got the trauma event and that personality trait, or one or the other, that's not enough to get ARFID. We need something else in the mix to kick us over that line. And the thing that we have is a high negative emotion or reaction to something. If we've got the personality trait and the trauma, and we've got a high negative emotion, and those things are combined, if the mind has connected food with this feeling of discomfort and high nerves and trauma, it will keep food away as the first line of defense in protecting the person, even if food's got nothing to do with the problem. And I'll talk about that in a little moment. What age can ARFID start? You know, the stats are really hard to find on this. So I just go back to all of my client files and what I've noticed over the years. And the statistics that I've pulled out of those files are this. Over 90% of my clients, those behaviours were started or were noticed when the client was in those formative years between 0 and 4. Yes, it can happen later on, and I'll talk about that in a moment, but that's where we notice that that ARFID behaviour began or started. Some early signs of ARFID. Big list. Okay, don't necessarily need to go through them all, but as I'm speaking, I know that you're scanning that list and you're probably just putting a little mental tick against some of those that probably remind you of you as that young person growing up. I'm going to pick some at random. Eating very slowly. Now, that's not ARFID, but we combine that with other things. We know that some people with ARFID not only eat slowly, but they store the food in the cheeks and the jowls, and after it being stored there for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, wow, nobody would eat that. It's disgusting. That's what we're seeing. Sometimes people can't even eat with their family. They've got to eat in a separate room. Sometimes when we're younger, there's really unpredictable behavior around food. There's tantrums and blowing up just because food is really getting to that fight-flight response. Oversensitivity to smells, tastes, and textures. Often there's a really strong gag reflex for people who have that leaning towards ARFID. Trying new foods is really difficult. Small group of safe foods. If we look back even further, someone might have had difficult transitioning from liquids to solids. Social situations are different. You've read the list. You probably tick the ones that are yours. They're the early signs. What are the types of ARFID? I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I mean, I think this is nice to know, but when someone comes to see me, my goal is to really ask questions and really get an understanding of where ARFID started from that. Very rarely now, I see it's just one. Normally, I see there's a really big overlap between all of them. We've got that sensory-based ARFID, that avoidant type behavior of there's a strong smell, a strong taste, I don't like the texture. And that type of ARFID person is avoidant of that sort of sensory overload that food can create for them. The aversive type was sort of a fear-based. Oh, that can be so many different things. Was there an episode when they were younger? Did they have some like IBS or gastrointestinal discomfort, choking incident? Was there allergy response? The list is quite large there. Something negative happens. They have a personality type. Those things were bolted together and they're aversive. And then there's sort of restrictive. Some people are just not interested in food. It might be because of a neurodiverse thing or something completely different. Maybe it's the interoceptive signals that are not being received. And all of a sudden, we're just not interested in food. It's low priority and we can forget to eat and it creates some problems. It can be a combination of all those things. And I'll guide you through some of those tonight. Some stats, some interesting stats. 21% of people with autism, neurodiverse, are going to experience ARFID at some time in their life. That's a really high percentage. 26% of people, they're going to experience ARFID if they've got comorbid ADHD. And as I mentioned before, it's a really high percentage of people who've got this high anxiety or generalized anxiety, over 74%. Those figures are through NEDC and the National Alliance for Eating Disorders in the USA. All right, there's three sort of questions that I like to ask to give me an indication of if the person in front of me is showing ARFID. And yes, you can go and get that tested, but I like to sort of give this analogy. And unfortunately, getting it tested and getting it on paper is not much help down the NDIS path in Australia at the moment. So yes, it may give you peace of mind. It might be a piece of paper that shows you what you've got or your child has got. But at the end of the day, I liken it to an extreme fear of spiders. You don't need to go and get tested to know if you've got an extreme fear of spiders. You know you've got it. These questions are going to help anybody that might be thinking, do I have ARFID, just get that a little clearer. I normally ask somebody how long the behaviour's been going. I'm listening. And if someone says from early childhood and they're still doing that at 34 years of age, or if they say, my parents said that I was fine up until 12 months or 24 months or 3 years, and then something happened and I just dropped food thereafter, I'm sort of listening for an event that might have made that happen. We don't always know what it is, but something happened. Some people say, oh, I've always been like this. It doesn't matter. It was when I was first born. I couldn't suckle properly, or all of a sudden I used to push food away. So when I'm starting to hear those sort of stories, I'm jotting them down and thinking, okay, let's go to question 2. I like to know what's happening in the person's formative years. A lot of adults on the session tonight. So if we look back when you were a young child, was it colic or reflux? Was there constipation? Interesting. About a quarter of all the people who come and see me have had really bad constipation early in those formative years. Food goes in, it doesn't really go through. Maybe the motility of the bowel is not working quite right, and it's painful having that poo. So the brain is thinking more food in, painful poo, and something starts to happen inside of the mind to avoid that pain. Maybe it was a poor transition to solids. Or I'm listening for anxiety. Maybe that young child who comes in, their parent says, I used to take them to kindergarten or school. They were hanging on my leg. They wouldn't let go. Sometimes I'm hearing people are quick to tantrum. Other times I hear things like, my child was scared of thunderstorms or moving house or strangers. So there's a personality type that sort of lends itself to heightened anxiety. And if that is attached to food, sometimes that ARFID situation can happen. And then we have things like neurodiverse, rigid thinking, and people who just don't like change. They're really happy in their comfort zone, and they're saying, listen, this is working. I'm eating this, and I feel fine. Why are you giving me pressure to go outside? So that type of person sometimes can push back on change as well. ADHD, and a distraction around food or just a disconnection from those signals. So I'm listening for those sort of instances, and if I get a layer of a few of those, I'm starting to think that we might be talking about ARFID, but we want to know. So really, it's the personal experience I'm looking for. So I would say to someone, just imagine there's a plate of food in front of you, and on that plate is food that you don't normally eat. In fact, it's food that you probably at the moment can't eat. Just want you to imagine that. Some people might call it non-safe food, non-preferred food. I don't really mind. I mean, I work with the language that the client is telling me in front of me. So I get them to imagine that. Then I get them to imagine that they think, okay, I'm going to give it a go. And imagine reaching out and picking up some of that food. And as it comes towards your mouth, something starts to happen in your mind, in your body. And I ask them, what is that? What's the feeling? What's the thought? What's the emotion? It doesn't need to make sense. Tell me what's happening. And people will say, I'm disgusted. I don't want to put it in my mouth. My brain is telling me I've got to spit it out. My brain tells me it's bad before I've even tried it. All of those things. And normally what happens is most people have a really strong gag reflex. However, adults don't remember that because as adults, we've been doing that when we were younger and had the gag reflex, and we've restricted what we've eaten over the time, and we don't go there on foods that we don't feel are safe and okay, so we don't experience that. But if we pushed out beyond those boundaries, that's probably what we would experience. Okay. Therapy, age and mind development. Really briefly, I think this is important. Some people say, okay, Glenn, you've seen a lot of people with ARFID, but why can't you help the younger people, that 0 to 7? Really, it's down to this, lots of other things, but mainly this. The brain development, that cognitive development in the temporal and those frontal lobes really kicks in around that age 6, 7, and 8. So when that kicks in, all of a sudden, we've got a better use of imagination and reasoning. We can sort of grab concepts and we've got better logic going on. So the type of therapy I do introduces people to their mind, show them how their mind works, introduce them to the part of their mind that's giving them this really negative feeling around food, and then we do some negotiation with it. It's a pretty tough concept for someone aged 0 to 7. So 0 to 7, other things need to be explored first. This is exposure therapy, OTs, speeches, child psychology. And I think, to be quite frank, they're tough yards. So those things are really working on the child and hoping that there's some connection. Once we get to sort of 8 plus, and there's that reasoning component, there's a really good opportunity for the conscious mind to come on board and make some change. I want to talk to you about that in just a moment. But now I want to really focus on adults with ARFID. Albert Einstein, here we go. You can't get any better, can we? We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. That's an interesting thing to think about with ARFID. The mind created the situation around food. So if we're using the same thought processes to try and solve that, to try and push ourselves out of that, it's going to be pretty interesting. But I think it's a bit deeper than that. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking. Here's the light bulb moment. What we're doing is we're using our conscious mind to do the thinking. We think we can logically think through everything, and because we're looking at it from all angles and we understand it, we're saying we're using all the capacity in our logical, conscious mind, and we can't solve the problem. It's because that's not where ARFID lives. ARFID lives in that deeper subconscious part of the mind. So we've got to use subconscious thinking in order to make the change. That's why it's tough to make the change just with our logical mind. You know, here's what ARFID looks like, or tends to look like, with adults. It's like the skiing, the cross-country skiing in the Olympics. You see them there and they're following the tracks of the person in front of them because they know that's the path of least resistance. And as all the competitors go down the same path, the grooves in the snow get deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's a little bit, it's like the neural pathways in our brain. All of a sudden we do something. There's an activity, there's a response. Whoa, that response seemed to deal with the problem that came up. And all of a sudden, if we do it a few more times, it becomes like those tracks in the snow. It's established. It's predictable. The response is known, the pattern is known, and we have the same outcome year after year, time after time. And that's where we are with ARFID. ARFID looks like tracks in the snow. So what is ARFID in adults? It can be different, by the way. I'm not suggesting that it's one thing. You know what? Maybe it's a feeling since childhood. Maybe someone has always been called a fussy eater. No, they're not fussy eater, but it's a term that might have been heard. Maybe because we're adults and we're talking about being a child 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago and more, that ARFID wasn't a known thing. So maybe there was a lot of pressure at home, a bit of force feeding, whether it's at home or the hospital. If that person got really malnourished, the hospital probably treated them like an anorexic patient because they didn't know that treating an ARFID client as an anorexic with the same protocols is not going to help. It might restore them to weight, maybe, but it's really not going to help the mental capacity and change. Or maybe it's just a feeling that gradually got worse over time. Maybe someone went from primary school to secondary school and the stress of that tipped them over the edge. Maybe it was a job, maybe a job someone's not enjoying, or it's a new job, anxiety and stress, maybe it's relationship pressure, and all of a sudden somebody starts a behavior that they weren't doing before. Sometimes it comes after a medical scare. Some people are doing okay with their life. Yes, they might be anxious or nervous and have other things going on, but food is okay. And then they get some bowel surgery or some other things like gastroparesis, etc. And all of a sudden, the shock, the trauma of that sets them off. And even though they want to go back to the old way of eating, it's as if their mind won't let them. Sometimes poor gut health, negative emotional event. So these are things that can create ARFID in adults. Sometimes it's been with adults all of their life. I think that's a big one. It's just they haven't talked about it because nobody's been there to help them understand it. But sometimes it can come on a little bit later. What are the barriers to change in adults? Very different to kids, right? And that's why I think this is really cool to have this conversation tonight. These are the things that I hear from adult clients who come and see me. I want to change, but I can't, therefore I'm a failure. Adults are really hard on themselves, right? Because they are successful in so many other areas of their life that they've been trying this thing not once or twice, but for years. It's not changing. Therefore, they really start to believe that they're a failure, and it can affect that emotional state. Others are just nervous. What happens if I try to change and I can't? I'm going to feel even worse. So that just puts up a barrier for even trying. Or they may have tried so many things over the years, nothing has helped. So they think, why bother? High expectations. This is a challenge, right? Because if we've got really high expectations and we set the bar for success high, which is what adults, which is what we do, it prevents us from sometimes accepting those small positive steps in the right direction, or even stops us from starting. I've heard this so many times. I've always been like this, so why bother trying? Whoa, that's a defeatism, and I know how that feels. I know the person might have put their best foot forward over the years, but nothing has worked. They've seen psychiatrists, psychologists, they've been in eating disorder programs, and they might have been able to pick up a strawberry and rub it on their cheek or take a tiny bite out, and that's as far as they've got. And they think, well, if it took me that long to get to the tiny bit of strawberry, I'm not going to worry about the rest. Sometimes people say, look, I've managed so far, you know what, it's too much effort. And it's disinterest and they're just defeated. But here's the key one. Most adults say, you know what, Glenn, I'm smart, I've got a good job, I'm mature, I'm logical, and I haven't been able to change it, so I'm never going to be able to change. So they don't even get off the starting line. I wonder which one of those sounds like you. By the way, if they sound like you, they can be changed, and they can be changed pretty quickly. But I fully understand why you feel like that. Barriers to change. Here we go. It can be a lifetime of negative experiences. And typically it's layer upon layer upon layer, not necessarily one thing. For adults, you've already gone through the lunch times at work and the professional development days, and all of a sudden work brings the lunches to share with you because, you know, they're training you and doing something new. You're the only person who's sitting to one side or has brought your own lunch or doesn't eat anything. You know, I had a lady come and see me many years ago, and she had knocked back promotion opportunities because in order to get promoted, her business was paying her to travel overseas to do some very specific training. She couldn't eat outside of her safe environment and therefore could not accept those promotion opportunities. Social, there's dinner parties, there's vacations. It's not only just not being able to eat the food at a dinner party, it's also sending a signal that if I don't eat it, my host will think that I don't like the food, and and it's just a whole swirl of emotions there. Travel is difficult. We got family stuff. There's meal times at home, and there's religious holidays. The only one at a Christmas or some sort of religious celebration, and we're eating crackers, and everybody else is having the food of the day. A tough one for adults is also being the parent to a child, being the role model. And when the parent can't eat the food that they're asking the child to eat, it just is, there's guilt and there's a heavy feeling. It's really tough. And sometimes it's health. You know, is it gut issues? Is it dull taste buds? Is there embarrassment layered on the years and guilt? So these are the barriers to change. This is a really tough stuff of a lifetime of doing this that the younger clients don't have, but adults are feeling all of this stuff. All right. I just want to put this one up to give you an idea of what change looks like or what it can look like. A lot of ARFID adults have an expectation that they're going to walk into a therapy session. There's going to be a click of the fingers, and they're going to go from fearing food or disinterest about food or inability to have new food to all of a sudden all those feelings are gone and they're going to be doing everything like everybody else. And you know what? Sometimes that happens, but often it's a transition between not being able to do it and being able to do it over time. I'll just give you a quick summary of these are clients that just popped into my mind as I was preparing this slide. Not real names, by the way, to protect the innocent. Craig, know his real name, but let's call him Craig. I never forget this particular client. We did a session. He was restricted. He's 32 years of age, all of his life. At the end of the session, I always ask clients to bring in food that they've never had before, and they try that. He just tried a couple of things, but his big thing, he wanted to try a cheeseburger at McDonald's. He's never eaten a cheeseburger in 32 years. All of his friends have them after they play footy. He'd never had one. 30 minutes after the session, I get a selfie and he's smiling. He's still in his car. He's ordered the cheeseburger. He's got a big bite out of it and he's having a fantastic time. The reason I put Craig at the top of the list is I recently reconnected with him after about 6 or 7 years, just recently. And I just said, how's things going? I saw you 6 or 7 years ago with ARFID. He said, I've never looked back. He said, you know what? I'm exactly the same as my wife now. He said, it took me a few months. I gradually explored, but he said, I feel fantastic. Warren, 62, overseas client, never been to an Italian restaurant with his wife, and sent me an email and said, you know what? I went there and I sat down and I had bruschetta, which is not the most difficult or the interesting food to have. But for Warren, he'd never been able to go into the restaurant. And here he was going in and taking a bite, having a conversation, life changing. I remember Sandra, 28, I remember it vividly that they'd booked a holiday. Not only her, but a few of her girlfriends were going away. She'd never been overseas before. She was distraught that all of her friends were going over here. She couldn't. And because she couldn't eat the food, she was worried about how she would survive over there. So all of a sudden, we walked her through a program. We got her to reduce the stress. I asked her to go out and get some Thai takeaway over the 6 weeks before the holiday was there, and gradually she worked her way through some of the menu. Now, she couldn't eat all of it, but she was able to have about 4 or 5 different sort of typical Thai dishes, and she went over there and had a fantastic time. Belinda was the lady I mentioned before with the overseas training. She had pushed back on promotion for years. She hadn't got it. Really astute woman, smart woman, and the best one in her company for the job, but couldn't go overseas for the training. Eventually, after some therapy, all of a sudden she's over there, life changing. And the last one, I remember this one quite clearly. Someone had never been able to go to an Indian restaurant or a Thai restaurant, so she went to both, but she came back and said she had a massaman beef curry. And that would have been something that was so far outside of what she could possibly ever see herself doing. That was the biggest thing. So I'm giving you these examples. These are examples of people that do things for specific reasons, going to a Thai restaurant or to an Indian restaurant because that's what their partner really loves to do. Going on holidays because that's the group of friends and we want to be part of them. It's having a cheeseburger at McDonald's because that's what the guys in the footy club love to do after the match. So change means being able to do something that's important for you. And what's important for you is not necessarily what's important for other people, but that's what we can do when someone pops into the therapy, really tailor that for them. And you know what? It's time for a change. I'm going to bring up old Albert again, right? Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Now, am I saying people with ARFID are insane? No, 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 no. Come on, you're picking me up the wrong way. What I am saying, though, is if we have a mindset that we don't believe we can change, if we have a mindset that we know everything that's going on with ARFID and we're not open to something new, then that really limits us to just thinking and doing the same thing over and over and hoping and praying that the ARFID will go away and change. What I'm hoping to present tonight, and if anyone wants to ring me up and have just a chat about it, I just want to expand that thinking so that you can see ARFID from a different perspective. You can understand what's going on. And when you've got that extra knowledge and it makes sense for you and you can see the clarity and logic of it, all of a sudden you're approaching ARFID from a new perspective and you're doing something different, and that's when change is possible. Here's some useful concepts that my clients have given me feedback on. And they've said, you know what, Glenn, this is the thing I took away from your therapy session that made the world of difference. They took away they've got two minds. I normally ask this of people and they say, I've got one mind. No, you've got two. You've got the conscious and you've got the subconscious mind, and they do really different things. Two, we personalize what instinct is because we've all got instinct, right? It's that thing inside of us. I call it the gatekeeper. And let's not just talk about it, let's put a face on it. That's what we do in number two. Perception is key. You know, our reality is inside our mind, it's not outside. And if we can change the way that we think about something, then the thing on the outside can stay the same and we can have a different response to it. Disassociation, I mentioned before. Let's put some distance between the challenge and you because it's not you. It's just something in the mind that's creating an obstacle for you. You're okay. It's just that you're putting yourself through this challenge and you didn't know it. And a scientific eater, a really cool term. You know what? Some people say that alone was enough to make me really take the next step because a scientist doesn't make their mind up before they do an experiment. They do an experiment and then make their mind up. In fact, the goal of a scientific eater is not to like food. The goal of a scientific eater is to explore and let their grown-up mind make the decision without the automatic feelings of the past shutting them down. And that's the goal of the therapy. Okay. How many minds have you got? I've given it away. You know it's two. There's the conscious and the subconscious mind. That subconscious mind is a really enormous part of the mind, a very strong part of the mind, where all of those things are. It's where our fears are, where our beliefs, where our habits, good and bad, long-term memory, that all resides down there. The conscious mind, you know, that thinks and plans and analyzes, got some willpower and some logic. I mean, I drew an iceberg, but I could have drawn a thoroughbred horse and a jockey. That little jockey sitting on top that big, massive, strong, powerful horse. You know what? If there's no jockey on the horse, it'll just go any direction that it wants. But that small jockey, if he holds the rein, he or she holds the reins the right way and sits on the horse the right way and gives the right direction, that powerful horse will go wherever that jockey directs it and has got every chance to win the race. Subconscious mind, that horse cannot win the race without conscious direction and control. Interesting. So what causes ARFID? This is the key. ARFID is really a strong, negative, cautious feeling in the subconscious mind. And it's linked to food. And it's ongoing sensory. It could be traumatic past experience. It could be like a personality trait or a neurodiverse trait, or it could be a combination of all those things. But ARFID is typically just that strong negative feeling, but it's in the subconscious mind. And in most cases, it was created at a really young age. Okay, let's personalize it. I want you to meet your food instinct. This is what I call the gatekeeper. By the way, a gatekeeper's only got two jobs. A gatekeeper's job is to open the gate or to close the gate. That's what your food instinct does. So you know what? I think instinct has sort of got two parts to it. We're born with some instinct, like a survival instinct, reproduction. It's that fight, flight, freeze. Most of you will know with young babies, there's sort of two instincts, loud noises. If we clap our hands, there's going to get a reaction or fear of heights. And then there's another instinct that we tend to learn along the way. It's patterns. We have experiences and the mind remembers the experience. Was it good or bad? What did we do? How did we overcome it? What should we do next time? And if it was a strong emotion with that pattern, it locks it away. And that's like an instinct that's learned over time. So what's the job of instinct? Pretty straightforward, right? I think the key job of instinct is to protect us from uncomfortable feelings or situations and certainly protect the body from those really dangerous situations. But there's something else the instinct does, and I think this is nearly as important. It wants things to be the same. It wants things to be predictable. It doesn't like change. If something is working and it's okay, it doesn't have to jump in and do its job. But when things change, it's got to leap in and try and make sure that we're safe. So it likes to stick to the safe and the predictable and the known. Meet your food instinct. There's your food instinct. It's a young food emotion. It's an emotion or strategy that was created in the subconscious mind when you were small, most times, and it continued unchanged. and it has the same intensity. It's got the same focus. It's got the same problem-solving focus as you had at that young age. It does not have your experience. It's just down there saying, I've got a problem. Food seems to be the problem. I'm going to keep it away. And this is why when you see an adult that has a negative reaction around food or exhibits fear or extreme disinterest, what you're looking at is on the outside, the adult body, but the emotion is that young emotion from all those years ago. You've got an adult body, but the emotion does not match the biological aid. That's because the food instinct does not live in your conscious mind. It lives in the subconscious mind. What pushes someone over the ARFID line? Not everybody gets ARFID. And in my experience, normally it's a couple of things. Now, I'm not suggesting that this list is exhaustive, but it just gives you an idea. Maybe there was some childhood trauma. Maybe that person's also got a really sensitive and nervous nature. And those two things combined, boom, they made someone oversensitive to food. Their mind thinks food is the problem or needs to control it. And you can see there's a list of other things there. Rarely it's one. Most of the time it's a couple of things. And it's as if the mind says, well, we can deal with one, but this is too much. And we've got to keep food away as a way of keeping the body safe and in control. How can we help somebody with ARFID to think differently? I really like this. There's a comfort zone, and that's that green part in the middle. There's the panic zone, which sort of is everything outside of that comfort zone. So how do we start to get somebody to move from the green into the red? I think one of the nicest ways to do that is just to do it gently at the beginning. A really good way of doing that is with a client is to connect with the things that they've done well in their life that they had to learn. Maybe it was learning the piano, maybe it was learning a skill on the soccer pitch, basketball, maybe it was singing a particular way, maybe it was something to do with computing or gaming that they weren't very good at, but they learnt and got very good at it. So I like to bring clients back to the simple fact that they've learnt a lot of things in their life where when they first started, they were nervous and uncertain, and then all of a sudden they became better and better, and now they're good at it. It's as if their comfort zone in the past was small and has been able to push out. So when we can connect with things in the past that the person has been able to do from a very nervous state into a known state, we can start to tap into those resources and help them with food as well. Double disassociation is super important. It's really nice when that ARFID adult gets an understanding that it's actually not them. There's nothing wrong with them. It's nothing wrong with them, the conscious mind. It's them, the subconscious mind, that's creating the feeling. So that's one disassociation of the conscious and the subconscious mind. And the other one is, in therapy, we like to bring that subconscious mind out of the person and talk to it at a distance. And there's a few different ways we can do that. And when we bring it out of the mind and we give the opportunity to the person to communicate with the part of the mind that's been holding them back for years, there's a big outflow of emotion normally. I hate you. You've been holding me back. What are you doing? And we can start that dialogue, and all of a sudden we can make a change. But just by putting some distance between ourselves and the problem, it gives us breathing space to know that we're okay. It's just this thing that's been happening in my subconscious mind. That's what I need to work on. That's what I want to change. And that's the goal of therapy. That's the goal of good therapy, I think, anywhere. It's to give back that decision-making around food in ARFID insistence. Give it back to the conscious mind. Because you know what? For all of your life as adults with ARFID, your food decisions have been made by your subconscious mind. And they are automatic reactions created from something that happened in the past where a negative feeling was remembered and a pattern was created, and that part of your mind said, my job is to protect the person. I'm going to look out for that pattern. I'm going to keep it away because that's what I've decided to make safe. You weren't invited to the meeting. The conscious mind often doesn't develop until that 3, 4, 5 years of age to some extent. And so your subconscious mind is making automatic decisions when you're younger, and they are there on the inside, and those programs are rolling out. You grow up, but the response is still young. Okay. ARFID's all about perception. I'm going to tell this really quick story. I like it. It's just going to drill home perception, because I can say the word perception, but until I tell you something like this, you're going to think, oh yeah, now I get it. Let's imagine you're walking down a path. We're going on a bushwalk somewhere, not long, just a short one. And as you're walking down the path, you're in the lead, by the way. It's a winding path, and you notice there's long grass either side, and you look at it and you think, so what? Doesn't bother you. Keep on walking. Then the sun is streaming through the grass. There's shadows all over the path. That doesn't bother you either. You keep on walking. And then you think to yourself, hang on, I'm in Australia, the land of spiders and snakes. And at that very moment that you think that, out of the corner of your eye, in the long grass, there's just this thing coiled up in the long grass. If you're like me, you panic, right? Your hands get sweaty, your heart starts to beat, you get all these nervous thoughts. I'm behind you and I look over your shoulder. I think I know what it is too. I'm not happy. But you're probably braver than me. So you get out your mobile phone, hit the little torch button, and you just want to see what it is. And ever so slowly you go up and shine your torch on it. And then I hear you laugh. And I say, what are you laughing at? You say, Glenn, it's just an old garden hose that's there. And we both laugh and we feel relaxed. And that's perception. Perception's got nothing to do with the thing. Perception is what your mind thinks the thing is. So good therapy with ARFID is giving the person the ability to change how they think about food. Because if I can change how someone thinks about food, the food can stay the same and they're just going to have a different experience. So perception is at the heart of good ARFID therapy. As I said before, if we can change the way that we look at things, the things that we look at change. And in ARFID, that thing is food. Cool. By the way, perception is not a logical, rational thing. Perception really is that strong thought in the subconscious mind. We can use our eyes, we can use our senses to get in contact with something, but the process goes on subconsciously. What do you say to somebody who's got ARFID so that you can have empathy with them, so you can support them, and you can make them realize that you understand and you're on their side and you're not judgmental? There's a couple of things I found really useful. Normally, if I say to somebody, look, I'm listening to your story, that's a tough life that you've been through, but you know what? You're not alone. I've heard that story hundreds and hundreds of times. So many other people, they feel exactly the same way about food as you. You're not crazy. It's not strange. It does happen. I can't tell you the amount of people that just hear those sort of words. They say, oh, thank God, because I've gone through my whole life thinking that nobody else feels about food the way I feel about food. Really nice to connect, right? Another one is saying, I know you're not doing it deliberately. I know that you just can't help it. It's like this feeling that's inside of you just overwhelms you and you want to do it differently, but when this feeling comes up, you just can't fight it. I understand it. I get it. Just by saying that doesn't solve the problem, but it lets somebody know that you really are connected and you've got some understanding of what they're going through. I also think something really important is this. With the ARFID eating disorder, and yes, it's an eating disorder, but it's really a perception disorder in some regards, change is possible. And interestingly enough, change is possible at any age. I think the oldest client I've worked with is in their 70s, high 70s. Now, we talked about that neural pathway getting stronger and stronger. For someone in their 70s, there's a really deep and strong neural pathway, but it can still be changed. So don't put off getting assistance with ARFID, whether it's me or some other therapist, and I'm a big one for you've got to match the person to the therapy. Some therapy is better than others for that type of personality. Don't put it off. Change is possible. This doesn't need to be a life sentence. Okay, what are some positive things that we can sort of do or say or be aware of around the home or just day to day to make life a little bit more bearable, particularly if we've got ARFID and we haven't moved away from it and we're just sort of on that journey? Keep it low stress. Don't put pressure on yourself. Pressure is nobody's friend with ARFID, because if you just present like exposure therapy and present, you're just re-traumatizing yourself. So there's a very low take-up rate of exposure therapy being, beneficial for ARFID. Stop beating yourself up. Something happened in your subconscious mind, and all of a sudden you weren't aware of it. And up until this point in time right now, maybe you didn't even know you had a subconscious mind, but that powerful part of the mind put together a pattern of thinking and behaving because of something that happened in your past, and that record, that pattern has been rolling inside of you, and you didn't know it for years. So you grew up, you got mature, you developed your conscious mind and all those logical skills, but this emotional response has been just overwhelming you for years. It lives in a different part of your mind. Don't beat yourself up. Nothing wrong with you. It's just something, an automatic something that we need to just change. You know what a nice is? Focus on progress, not perfection. Don't all of a sudden think that it's going to change overnight. It might, but why don't we just celebrate the small wins? If you're on the ARFID journey and you're seeing somebody and you're noticing some positive help in your life, celebrate that. Every step forward is great because progress is not linear. Sometimes we do things, it's slow and we're doing it, and then all of a sudden the door opens up and it just gets easier. So just celebrate the small things. Don't restrict the quantities of food. Eat as much of the food, the safe food, as you can. Yes, you want to change, and yes, you'll explore therapy, but don't discount the food that you're having at the moment. Any food is good food as long as you can get some goodness into you. Be resilient to outside judgment. You're going to get a lot of it. You probably had a lot of it already in your life. The people that are commenting on you and judging on you do not know about the eating disorder ARFID and the mental challenges that you've been going through. They do not know. So as much as you can, their comments are not the comments that you need to listen to. The comments you need to listen to are people that are really understanding of ARFID, know you and your challenges, and are working with you to help it. Choose the right therapy model. Maybe you find that psychology and connection with that person is good. Maybe you're going to find that an FBT or a CBT approach has worked for somebody else that you know, and you're going to go through that as well. Maybe you've got the temperament to do that. Or maybe you find that exposing yourself to some sort of therapy like the one I have, which is training your mind, giving you a really insight into how your mind operates, and then through hypnosis, all of a sudden connecting to those good parts. Maybe that's for you. I'm not suggesting that what I do is right for everybody, but try and connect with the therapy that's right for you. And by the way, it's typically not going to be one. You might come to someone like me and the door of opportunity opens, and all of a sudden you begin to reach out and try things. And then when you go back to a dietitian or you speak to your psychologist, all of a sudden it just makes sense because the fear is diminished and you can start to do those other things that those other professionals have been talking to you about for years, and it starts to click together. You know, ARFID's in the DSM-5, and I think we're appropriate, so we're not hiding it anymore. Where it's appropriate to share the term, share the challenge. Now, that's not going to be for everybody, but it's going to be something that you can talk about. And at the right time, that will take some weight off your shoulders as well. Get your partners, get your family educated. There's some great resources out there. You can search for them. There's a little animated video I created. Maybe that's a starting point. It's just 12 minutes and it paints a picture of ARFID. I've had so many families talk to me and say, you know what, Glenn, I sent that video to my family. Oh my goodness, it made such a difference. Now they understand what I've been going through all these years. Use the ones that connected with you, share them with the family, get them on the same page. And there's lots of organisations around that you can connect to for support. Eating Disorders Families Australia, very good, very strong organisations with good support networks. Not only supportive of the person with ARFID, but even more stronger supporting the carers of someone with ARFID. So someone like your partner. If they are really at a loss to know how they can support you better, maybe tapping into EDFA is good for them. Eating Disorders Victoria, a wealth of knowledge there. By the way, these organisations also have the counselling, and you can ring them up if you're feeling particularly down and you just need someone to talk to. So they're a really good resource. Butterfly Foundation as well can point you in the right direction and give you people to contact. So don't be shy in reaching out for assistance across the board with lots of different organisations. That's that short video I mentioned before. I think it's up to 250,000 views. Look, a short story. I created it, I don't know when it was, 3, 4, 5 years ago. I can't quite remember. And at the time, a marketing person said, Glenn, Don't put it on YouTube. It's 13 minutes. Nobody will look at it. They've got humans have got the attention span of goldfish now. They're only going to pick up something that's 30 seconds, at best 60 seconds long. Nobody will watch it. I've looked at all the stats and I've looked at how long people stay on the video, and 250,000 views later, this has been one of the things that has given joy to many people, that they've begun to understand their ARFID. They can share it with family and friends. So maybe if you haven't seen it, just jump on board and have a look. Okay, what are the expectations for recovery? I'm really focusing on adults here. So where fear is a component of ARFID, and I suspect from all the people I've seen that is nearly 100%. There is some fear that's built into ARFID over the years. May not have been fear-based to begin with, but as they've been restricting, as it's difficult, as the adults, they've built up this thing that I can't do it, I'm not going to put myself in this situation. As the fear gets bigger, pardon me, then there's a really great chance of change, because we can change the fear that's overlaid on ARFID. Where there's sensory components, there's also fear on top of that, because that negative sensation has put people off doing something with food. But here's the thing. We can remove the fear. The sensory component might still be there. Maybe it's a little bit less than when they were younger, but we're not getting rid of the sensory component. But when we get rid of the fear on top of it, it's manageable. And people can push through that minor discomfort, but the fear was the thing that was not letting them do it. And when someone has got rigid thinking, or change is not one of their strong suits, then we can tap in to what they've done well in their life, things that they've been able to change in their life, even if they're small things, and we can really give them an opportunity to think about, well, how did I do that? What's missing in my ARFID journey? What did I have in my journey about learning that thing? And when we can find out what's missing and we can connect that back to ARFID, a lot of the time the people can tap into resources they've already got and start to make some headway. Okay. What's the recovery path look like? You know what? I think everybody learns to do things differently. Some people are quick learners. Some people jump in and have a go. Some are cautious. They like to have a look and hold back. So it's your race, your pace. And the same way that you learn anything else in your life is the way that you're going to learn to do food again. So don't put any pressure on yourself. So, the goal of good ARFID therapy is not to like food. That is absolutely not the goal. The goal is for you to be able to explore the food and check it out without being overwhelmed by those old feelings. That's the goal of the therapy. There's a therapy that I've been doing for quite some years, and I think the thing I want to talk about on this page is for adults who have got a lot of skin in the game, who have been doing this around food for a long time, who want to change, and who turn up to a therapy session motivated. Over 90% of the adults I see get some positive output from that very first therapy session. Over 90%. When I'm talking about younger children, they also get benefit, but sometimes they might be there and I say, what do you want to get out of today, or why are you here? And they say, well, mum just brought me here. Yeah, that's a hard yards when that happens. But adults, I've never had an adult come and see me who's been dragged there by a partner. The adults that come and see me are there typically because it's a last resort, by the way. I'm very rarely spoken to as the first resort. They say, I've tried everything else. This is driving me crazy. I just feel really down about myself. I'm ready. That type of client, typically, they're already 50% there. I've just got to show them how their mind works, introduce them to the part of the mind that's giving them ARFID, explain why it was doing that according to their personal journey through their life, and then we ask for the change. And then we've got to help them with motivation and momentum after we get rid of the fear. I mentioned before, this is super important, that I think when you're on this journey, it's sort of a really team approach, that you shouldn't close down the opportunity of, once we can reduce that anxiety and fear and disinterest around food, then you might be open to getting some direction from a dietitian or a psychologist, or maybe an eating disorder program. Some clients don't need that, by the way. They're up and going and all of a sudden they feel freer and they're on their own journey. But for some, they've never thought about food. They just don't know how to do it. And sometimes that professional assistance can be really helpful. Getting rid of the fear first opens the door to speak to a lot of these other people. Just for some general information, over the years, I've been asked this many times, so I'm just starting to do something about it now. Some of my clients get really nervous in a one-on-one session. They feel as if it's quite intense because they're in the room with me. There's a parent there, or as an adult, they might have their partner there, and I'm chatting to them and looking at them, and they feel like a bit of a deer under the spotlight. And some people that's fine, but other people don't really cope in that one-on-one environment. It gives them high stress. So many people over the years have said, is there group therapy? I'd love to sit in a small group of people where I'm not the sole focus of attention and I can connect with other people that have had the same challenges as me. That would be really cool. So just recently, I've put out some information saying I'm going to run a session in Melbourne. I'm aiming for late August, maybe it'll be September, depending on the demand. I've already got about 5 people that are interested in coming along to that. I'm setting the session at no more than 15, but I probably, even if I got 10 or 11 or 12 people, I think that's a really good number. Certainly no more than 15 to keep it really intimate and small. And that's going to give an opportunity for me to share some strategies with those people, some NLP and some hypnosis you can learn at home, really cool strategies to help you on your ARFID journey, introduce you to other people who are doing ARFID. Maybe they're not doing it your way, maybe they're doing it a different way, but it's really connecting with that like-minded group, and that's a really cool feeling. And then all of a sudden, on that day, you're going to go through a full ARFID experience. There's going to be a time we're going to bring some food out and we're going to say, okay, you've been through the therapy. Now I'm going to guide you on checking out some new food for the very first time. And also, you're going to be immersed in that post session motivational session as well. So you're going to walk away with the entire ARFID therapy experience that I do with somebody over 2 weeks. You're going to get all of that in one day. I think it's really exciting. I'm looking forward to it. And if you're interested, just reach out. I'll post some information on the group as well. I'm going to really heavily discount that because this is the first session and I just want people to experience it. So I'll post all the details soon. We've come towards the end of the session. And I think if you can take away anything from tonight, it might be this. A lot of people with ARFID are looking for the magic bullet. They're looking for a tablet. They're looking for something that they can take because they have a concept that there's something physically wrong with them. And if they can just fix the physical thing, all of a sudden the ARFID will disappear. I wonder if I've said enough tonight to give you a different perception of ARFID. That in fact, there's nothing wrong with you. What happened was that in your formative years, for most of you, something happened. And that young, instinctive mind who doesn't have your life experience and knowledge quickly jumped in and made a decision about how it should react in a situation of which it thought food seemed to be the aggressor or the problem. And once it locked in on a behavior, it didn't change. You grew up and it stayed the same. So tonight was all about saying, okay, how about if I can put that behavior at a little bit of a distance, get a look at what is it? What does it look like? Why it's doing it? And then all of a sudden, when we do that, we know that I'm okay. I'm not the problem. Now I can work on this challenge and you can find a support to do that. So I'm going to say thank you very much. I'm going to sort of let this one go down now and just have a look at some comments and certainly have a chat. So just bear with me just one moment. Okay. And I'm just going to stop